we also want to bring into the conversation our friend, national security expert, retired Marine intelligence officer, Hal Kempfer, to answer some of your questions here, and he joins me now. Hal, good to see you yet again. You've been providing so much great insight and expertise throughout the course of the last now 7 days. My question to you, and it seems like we're getting some reporting in from Fox News' Jackie Heinrich at the White House, that the United States, Hal, urged Israel to delay its ground operation in Gaza until safe passage for Palestinians can be secured, and urged them to abide by the laws of armed conflict, something you and I talked about a couple of days ago. And so Jackie was still working to get clarity on Israel's response and Egypt's. She says also, and we're learning from the State Department, Hal, the first charter flight has already departed the region. Approximately 100 people were evacuated. U.S. officials believe interest in leaving may increase in the coming days as Israel moves forward with its operation in Gaza. And I do have a tweet that Jackie Heinrich tweeted about some of this reporting. If we could change back to that tweet we just had from Jackie there. I'm going to put that up on the screen. Take a look at this, Hal. So Jackie is kind of citing this Bloomberg report, saying people familiar with the Biden administration's stance say the White House fears that Israel doesn't have a plan for what comes next for Gaza after an invasion, and is pressing them to think beyond the immediate goal of eradicating Hamas here. So, Hal, that was a long-winded kind of run-up into my question. What's going on here? Caution, restraint, some recriminations, hesitation? What say you?
Well, Andrew, first off, certainly what Israel's concerned about is that they're going to get pressure from other countries and certainly from the United States, that we would somehow urge restraint or caution or holding back. That's been on the table since this thing began. Historically, Israel gets attacked by Hamas. They go in to do something, and then normally there's all sorts of international pressure for Israel to show restraint, to pull back, to basically not do a lot of operations that they think they need to do. And at the end of the day, Israel's always felt they've had something of a probably a justified chip on their shoulder, that they get attacked, they respond, and within a couple of weeks, there's an international blame game on Israel. And that's just how history has kind of rolled out. And in fact, to the point that a lot of people forget why Israel was responding to something. So that's kind of a context way of saying what's going on. Now with this, that's possible. There may have been words to that effect. 24 hours is a very short time frame to try and get that many people to move out of that urban area. I will say this. If you look at the terrain, if you actually look at the distances involved, there's a couple of things. Number one, it's completely flat. Nobody has to go over mountains. It's very flat. It's very even. There's a lot of roads going south. So in terms of movement, yes, a lot of people could literally get out and walk south, relatively few kilometers when you think about movements of large populaces, and actually be inside the area that Israel does aim to go. So that isn't, it sounds difficult. It's actually not as difficult in terms of human movement as one might think. Now, moving 1 million people in 24 hours from anywhere is very difficult. I'm not sure that Israel didn't put that time frame on that with the idea in mind that they're probably not going to get all out of there within 24 hours. But what will happen is that a lot of them have moved out of the area. They've moved out of that dense urban terrain. They moved out of that northern area. And what that's done is, in fact, some of the reporting today was showing streets that were pretty empty in Gaza itself, and that allows freedom of movement. One thing that Israel wants to do is they want to be able to move around Gaza, move around that entire area, and look for hostages. And one thing that restrains them from being able to do that, in fact, one of the biggest risk factors for special operations when you're doing a raid like that, is coming across civilians that can basically say, hey, look, there you are, and you're basically in a high-risk situation. So what you want to do is you want people out of that area. I think that may have been some of the psychology. Also, to get people to move out, to give them freedom of action. And what you're seeing tonight is more airstrikes. They could hit things they may not have hit before because they're worried about collateral damage. So there may be more to this. It may not be everything as quite as they say.
Yeah, I mean, Hal, look at the shot that we have right now and how active it is. It's about 10 after the 3 a.m. hour there in Gaza. To your point, though, Israel alerted the United Nations late last night, saying that they were urging and calling for 1.1 million Gazans in the north of the Gaza Strip to evacuate within 24 hours. UN officials said it's impossible. Where are these Gazan civilians going to go? And what about Egypt? There's this corridor that I have been reading about, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't have the name of it, starts with an R. I believe it's the Rafah corridor that remains closed, right?
There is a corridor that goes into Egypt. It's a gate that's been there. It was open and then it was closed. Now they're trying to get it open again. There's a negotiation between Israel, Egypt, I think the U.S. is involved now, and the United Nations on trying to set this up. The context, a couple things to your question, where are they going? There is a riverbed. It's a dry riverbed now, but it's a riverbed, and they have designated that going south of that riverbed as the literal line in the sand, if you will. That's where they need to hit. That's where people are saying go south of that, and you'll be out of essentially out of harm's way. And that allows freedom of action. Again, I think the time frame may have been, I hate to say it was psychological operations, but it may have had a little bit of psyops with it. Strategic communications, give them a short time frame, do everything with the pamphlets and everything else, and you get a lot of people moving faster. And I'm sure some of them, they're talking to psychologists, they said if you give them a longer time frame, they will hesitate. I'm sure they said some of them will talk themselves out of moving. They're going to get pressure from Hamas. You want people to feel a sense of urgency. You want them to feel a sense of dread, if you will, to get them moving out of harm's way. And I think this is probably a little bit more sophisticated in terms of some of the psychological implications than maybe it's giving credit for in the international stage. So I think that's some of the thinking. Now, if it turns out that they do launch the ground operation tonight, then I guess whatever I said about psyops is kind of a moot point because they did actually move that fast. But that's what I think is going on there.
Okay, Hal, what about the fact that Hamas leaders, and this has been reported today by, I believe, AP and Reuters, Hamas leaders are telling Gazans to ignore this. Why would they do that?
Because they want human shields. They're a terrorist group. First and foremost, this is not a regular army. They're not signatories to Geneva Convention, nothing like that. They want to surround themselves. It's a buffer for them. They surround themselves with civilians. It makes it easier for them to hide. It makes it that much more difficult for the IDF, to the Israeli Defense Forces, to actually go in and do attacks. The other thing is it increases the amount of civilian casualties in any operation the IDF wants to do. And Hamas, just like they wanted to kill a bunch of Israeli civilians, they don't mind sacrificing Palestinian civilians, increasing, pardon the expression, the body count of collateral damage civilians as part of their broader strategic communications plan, their broader goal. In fact, if you look at why would they do something like this, what was their thinking? Their thinking was to do something so provocative that Israel would have to go into Gaza. And if Israel goes into Gaza, they have a plan, if you will. They have a concept of what they want to do. And part of that is they want to really just take them at their word on this. They want to launch a global jihad against Israel. Okay. The way you do that is you showcase Israel and you make them, you showcase them in the worst possible light, and you make it difficult for them.
Yeah. Hal, I want to put up this tweet as well when you're talking about, we can get to the hostage question in just a moment, but there are American citizens right now in Israel who are not hostages, who just want to get out of the country, back to the United States, and they can't do so because of limited domestic travel options here. But take a look at this tweet. Matthew Miller from the State Department, the spokesman there, saying this today. While many U.S. citizens are departing Israel on commercial transportation, The State Department is chartering flights to provide additional options and capacity. Our first flight carrying U.S. citizens and their immediate family members from Israel is wheels down in Athens. And it goes on to say a big thank you. Now, Hal, also, according to Jackie Heinrich's reporting, the U.S. is also in its initial stages of planning a cruise ship option for evacuees. That's something.
That is something. I got to tell you, though, I don't know what it is. Somewhere in the planning process, every time we do these big military operations in the Middle East, somebody comes up with a cruise ship option. I can't explain why. I've been there for a couple of different wars. Somebody always pops up with a cruise ship option. I don't quite understand it, but somewhere someone offers a cruise ship up for whatever reason, holding people, moving people, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I want to point out the geography. Interesting, last night when you and I talked about this, you may have mentioned Athens was one of the logical places that we saw. It's a big international airport. You have a lot of throughput factor. You have a lot of connections all over Europe and around the world. And you can get and with a chartered flight, you end up having these much shorter sortie rates. Or you can have a high sortie rate. In other words, you can fly into David Ben Gurion Airport, pick up everyone, get them off to Athens, offload them, and then get back. It's not like flying them all the way to the United States. Okay. You can turn it around faster, get them out of harm's way faster. So that makes sense. Also, within the Mediterranean, there's a lot of cruise ships available, and there is no maritime threat. There is no naval threat against ships. So they could go in there, load them up, and then I would say probably take them to Greece would be my guess.
Okay.
And do the same sort of thing.
So, Hal, before we get into more questions here, especially about the hostages, if you could, what are we watching right now? I mean, this is very, very active. When we were speaking just this very same time last night, it was not nearly this active in the shot that we have over Gaza right now. Take a look at that. What are we watching? What are we seeing right now there?
What you're watching is they're shaping the battle space, and they're eliminating command and control targets. There's a whole, they've been collecting intelligence with everything you can possibly imagine to figure out where Hamas is. They have targets they probably had for a long time. The problem is there's a number of targets that probably had civilians living close by, and that goes back to the 24-hour thing. You know, they wanted people to urgently move out of the way, to get out of that area, because they're trying actively to minimize civilian casualties. Now, it may sound a little draconian to tell everybody you got to get out of there within 24 hours, and everyone says, oh my gosh, this is my home. How can I get out of here? How can I do this? But if you saw what happened, a lot of them did. I'm not saying all of them did, but a lot of them actually did move south. It did have that sense of urgency. It had that gut sense of fear, if you will, that from what was coming next, that it got people to move, and they're going to move out of harm's way. Now they're in an area south of that Gaza Strip that I'm sure the Israelis are working some sort of plan on how to get water, food, whatever else to them. The other thing is when they move, the Israelis are watching. And this is something it's in intelligence. We do it all the time. Sometimes we do something to provoke people to move, and then we watch what moves. We're watching who moves, how they move. We're watching all sorts of things. We're templating out with certain sort of, if you will, we're profiling movement, if you will, profiling activities and stuff. And based on that, we're trying to figure out, was that a target? Was that a command and control target? Are there Hamas moving? Could they be moving hostages south? That's a very likely thing, especially if you give them a short time frame. They may have to actually pull the hostages out of a building, put them on a vehicle, and take them south.
Yeah.
From an intelligence standpoint, that's invaluable to know that sort of thing.
Yeah, Hal, let's talk about the hostages right now. There was a report, though, some Hamas leaders put this out today, that one of these Israeli strikes killed 13 of the hostages, Israeli hostages, that were being held there in Gaza. And I've seen some corroborations of that and some not. But if that remains true, what does that say to the nature, to the, I guess, idea going forward that Israel is striking these targets and 13 of their own hostages were killed in one of them. Have you seen that?
I've seen, yeah, I haven't read that particular one, but
Okay.
I heard it, I think, on something they were talking about. They were actually hitting hostages. I didn't get the number 13, but what I will tell you is this, it will happen, and it's going to happen more, and it's going to happen throughout this entire thing. The hostages are secreted all over.
Yeah.
There is no perfect way they know where they are. And the goal of what Hamas did by taking hostages was they wanted to basically tie the Israelis up so they wouldn't hit anything by saying there could be hostages here. What if I may say, what if I read the certainly the temperature gauge, or if you will, the temperament of Bibi Netanyahu, of the Israeli government right now, they're not slowing down. They do not feel constrained. They're going to move in there, and they have decided that they are taking out Hamas. They have said it over and over again, and I think everyone needs to kind of take this at face value. They're going to go in and root out Hamas. It's going to be a very difficult operation. However, in saying that, yes, they will put hostages at risk, and I don't doubt. It may turn out that 13 hostages were killed in a strike. I have no doubt that more hostages will be killed in strikes. When you're doing airstrikes or artillery or anything, it's not an exact science.
Right.
And it's sad, and you try to prevent it. But that's one of the reasons, if I may say, that last night there were reports that they were sending hostage rescue raid groups or teams into Gaza, into the city itself, looking for hostages. And it may have been they were looking for hostages in the very same places that they later hit. That's very possible. But I would also say this: if Hamas is saying it, don't take it as gospel.
Of course, so, yeah. We know their tactics, propagandistically speaking. But take a look at some of this. This is some video we've compiled to what you were talking about, Hal. Gazans, some of them are abiding by and following the guidance from the Israeli government to evacuate, to leave here. We've been covering all of the candidates on the GOP campaign trail, Hal, and they have been commenting on this war now. And Ron DeSantis brought up an interesting point. He was defending Israel's posture here. He said, what combatant in a war, what side who's fighting on a war, alerts citizens like this to get out before they launch their offensive? Does he have, is there a kernel of truth there? What do you make of that?
What's interesting is he might be one of the few candidates that could actually talk knowledgeably about that. He was the Judge Advocate General, and I actually went to the same school that the Judge Advocate Generals do on the law of war, and where they get trained on this. And it is a little bit above and beyond the norm to actually alert them to evacuate a city prior to this. What I've seen is that Israel is taking extraordinary measures in some way, I would say, within there. And if you do strike operations and stuff, usually you always have a lawyer sitting there with you. I know it sounds very strange, but yes, we have a lawyer, and we run these every time we do an operation or targets. We look to the lawyer and we say, is this legal? Is it ethical? Is it we're doing it the most humane way possible? Are we trying to avoid all these legal parameters under the international law of war? And I've no doubt the Israelis are doing the exact same thing. And they probably said, look, do this. And from a practical standpoint, this is exactly what I want them to do. I want them to move civilians out of there. I also want Hamas to move from wherever they're ensconced in that city, in that area. I would like them to get up and try and move on the roads and go south, so I can actually see where they are. I can track them and hopefully take them out at some point. So there's a lot of very practical reasons, along with the ethical, moral, legal reasons why you would give them this. And they didn't just, they contacted the police, they dropped leaflets, they did a lot of different things. So he's got a point. He does have a point on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hal, we're going to be speaking with you for a large chunk of this hour, but we do want to take the opportunity to take a quick commercial break. Hal, stay with us here.